Hi guys, the title of the title you see on the screen today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and we'll get started. This story begins in one beautiful castle under the light of a shining moon. There the curtains swayed in the night, and two lovers held hands in the darkened room. Lying next to her fiancé during their wedding night, the girl was the only one who couldn't sleep no matter how hard she tried. Just herself. And so, as she looked around the room with her eyes, she couldn't figure out why she was the only one who couldn't sleep. As she looked at her husband and the way he was sleeping peacefully and dreaming, she didn't understand how he could, just like that, sleep. So she decided to take matters into her own hands and picked them up and slammed them hard against the bed for him to wake up. She was also very annoyed at the way he clung to her so tightly that she couldn't even get up. And so, when the girl did, he immediately woke up. He looked at the girl and asked her why she was awake. She was a little embarrassed and answered that she just couldn't sleep because of all her thoughts. The man started to roll over to the other side and said that she was very tired, which was probably why she had better sleep, in order to be awake the next day. He also said that he had heard that she had quite a long way to go from the Einstern kingdom. The girl, hearing this, was very much surprised. She didn't realize what a long road it was and what kind of kingdom it was. The girl did not remember anything at all. And all because she had found herself in this body 5 minutes before the start of her own wedding. The man, for his part, told her to try to get to sleep as soon as possible, while the night was still going on. The girl continued to lie on the bed without sleep, realizing that this day she would definitely not be able to sleep peacefully, for she knew nothing. But in fact, she found herself in a novel she had once read long ago. She also thought about the fact that it was, of course, the most cliched plot of those cliched novels she had once loved so much. But it didn't upset her. She was going to read quite a bit because she had exams due the next day. This series of novels was not yet finished, and it was called The Secret Life of Rabbit Girl. She even wondered if the future of this very bunny girl was as bleak as her own. But she wanted to check it out, so she made a big cup of coffee to study the story. Despite the fact that she didn't want to stay up late, but she drank just an unbelievable amount of caffeinated drinks. The girl realized that she would definitely not fall asleep, so she decided to start this novel. But even though she thought so, she still ended up falling asleep. And after that, she woke up already in a completely different world. As soon as the girl opened her eyes, she saw the maid in front of her, who was trying to wake her up by crouching on the bed, and she saw the rest of the maids as well. One of them called her Princess Gloria, and said that she should get up as soon as possible, because it was time to go. The girls did not understand what was happening to her, for she was behaving strangely. The girl herself, who was already in her wedding dress, because the maids quickly helped her put it on, asked why they suddenly started calling her a princess and who they were. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the incredible color of golden hair, pale skin, and eyes that were like sapphires. And the moment she saw her reflection in the mirror, she was incredibly surprised. She even cried out in surprise, asking if she was really a princess now, and also told herself that she was incredibly beautiful. This, of course, made her happy. The maids, when they saw this strange behavior, immediately started whispering behind her back, not understanding what was going on with her at all. Then the girl turned to the maid who was standing too close to her, and inquired why she was in that dress at all, and why she had that strange bouquet in her hands. The maid replied that she was actually preparing for her wedding, and all this was just for her. When Gloria heard this, she was very surprised and asked how it could be her wedding. But the maid did not understand what was happening to her, and said that she had agreed to get married, and it was the perfect day to marry the Duke of Salisbury. The girl could not understand what was going on, but when she heard that name, it became very familiar to her. She pondered for a while, then remembered that this was exactly the father of that idiot princess from the novel she'd read. And also remembered the important detail that he is a wolf in general. The girl could not contain her emotions and started screaming, saying that she must be asleep, because she definitely could not get into this novel. The maids looked at her in surprise, and one of them whispered to another that the princess must have gone mad with great excitement. Gloria herself, for her part, was incredibly worried. She did not know who the main character in this novel was a girl rabbit. However, she did not think that she had become exactly her. But then she remembered the name the maids had called her, and realized that she was Gloria Ainston. She is the fourth princess of the Kingdom of Ainster, who eventually became the Duchess of Salisbury. And she was also coincidentally the stepmother of the main character. She was the main villain of this novel, and the girl did not understand what idiot could have made her that way. She didn't want to be there at all, but she was going to be the villain. The girl also thought about the fact that if she was in this body now, she didn't know then where Gloria herself had gone, or what the point of it all was at all. She walked down the aisle all dressed up and didn't know what to do now and what people do in such situations. She saw a beautiful man standing next to her completely dressed up and thought it was all a dream. But the thoughts faded as she examined his face and realized it was Grayan Salisbury standing in front of her. He was the leader of the Wolf clan, and the girl decided to approach him after all, thinking about how this wasn't such a bad dream. After all, he was a handsome man. Gloria also thought that since it was all a dream, she might as well play along, because she wanted to know what would happen next. So she took his hand, and they went into the large, spacious hall. She also thought about the fact that, since she would go back to her world as soon as she woke up, she could enjoy the beautiful faces present in her beautiful dream until then. But the next morning, when she did manage to sleep, she woke up and found herself in the same bed. Gloria realized it wasn't a dream after all. In fact, in the original story, the girl despised beastmen, and that's why her husband ignored her on their first night, and that made her incredibly angry. But now she was angry about something else entirely, namely the fact that she couldn't go back home. She soon calmed down, but she didn't know what to do now. Gloria suddenly felt a strong pain in her stomach and realized that she should eat, because even in a situation like this, her stomach demanded food. Soon she was out of bed, and the maids began to escort her to the dining room. She walked past all these beautiful columns and decorations and could not look at them. Everything around it looked very big and expensive, and Gloria didn't know how she could even live in this place, because she would just get lost. When she saw the two maids who were keeping up with her, she didn't realize if they were going to keep following her. She wanted to look around and be alone for a while to think about what she should do next. She kept walking, thinking that she probably wouldn't be able to get rid of them. But then suddenly she heard someone's voice behind her looking for mistress. Gloria was very surprised and did not understand who could call her mistress. She went through the door where the sounds were coming from, and at that moment a small, incredibly soft and cute little bunny flew straight into her face. The maids, when they saw this, were all immediately frightened because they knew how mean Gloria was, and they realized that this rabbit now will definitely not be well. But the moment Gloria opened her eyes and saw right into the eyes of that huge rabbit, she screamed. The maid, who was also frightened, screamed with her, and there was a great loud shriek in the room. Then Gloria did get the little furry animal out of her face, and when she saw that it was a rabbit, she couldn't believe her eyes. The maids in turn realized that this was very dangerous, because the princess would probably strangle him right there for attacking her like this. However, to their great surprise, Gloria made a very cute face and said that this rabbit was incredibly beautiful. She started stroking the animal and saying various compliments to it. The maids didn't understand what was going on, and for a while they just watched what was happening. One of them realized that it was still very dangerous, so she asked that someone call Mrs. Milton for help in dealing with such a situation, and to tell them what they should even do. Mrs. Milton soon came in to see them. She was the governess, the most important of them all. When she saw Princess April, she smiled and said she had found her at last. Gloria immediately turned in her direction, and when the woman saw that she was crying, she wondered why it was happening. Of course, she was referring to the rabbit that was sitting in her arms. Milton immediately began yelling at Gloria, asking what she had even done to the princess, but the girl, continuing to hold the little girl, replied that nothing of the sort had happened. Then the governess came close to her and asked her if she really thought she would believe it. No way. She must have done something to this beautiful creature. Then she turned to the princess, saying that they had nothing more to stay here, so they should leave already soon. But the rabbit wasn't going to do anything. He climbed up on Gloria's head and was shaking with fear, because the governess started shouting loudly, saying that this place was dangerous. The girl herself at this point said that she didn't even know where it could be more dangerous, but at this point, The little rabbit suddenly began to cry because it was very upset. Then Mrs. Milton came up and began to address the princess, asking why on earth she was crying. Was it really the missus who had done something to her? But Gloria turned away from the woman and said it was all because of her face. The rabbit continued to cry bitterly. She immediately began to comfort this beautiful little girl and told her that she shouldn't cry at all. Mrs. Milton was incredibly angry and didn't know what to do. Gloria, in turn, hugged the little rabbit and said that she was a good girl. But if she cried, her eyes would swell up and hurt. The maids, when they saw all this, were incredibly surprised, for they had never seen such behavior from her before. Mrs. Milton, calming down a little, said that she had thought the girl hated beastmen. That was why she had tried so furiously to get that rabbit away from the girl. In fact, Gloria had to scream very loudly and throw this animal far away, asking what kind of monster it was and not understanding why on earth it had to be in this place with her. But now the girl was absolutely calm, and smiling, asked what it was she was even saying. No way. She accepts absolutely all living creatures in this world. Mrs. Milton was very surprised and asked if they had been given some broken Gloria, for there was obviously something wrong with her. Then she smiled nervously and turned to Princess April, telling her to go to her, for she would be much safer with her, and added that she would take her to her room so that it would be safer. However, the girl who was a rabbit didn't want to go to her, so she snuggled close to Gloria and continued to sit in her arms. The governess, when she saw this, was at first incredibly surprised, and afterwards became angry. She didn't understand what was going on and why. That's when a man came to confront them. It was her husband. He went up to all the ladies and asked them what was going on. Gloria turned to him calmly and said that the princess was here, and she had absolutely no idea what had happened to her. But she thought the girl seemed very surprised at something. When she saw her husband's surprised face, she said that was why she had comforted Princess April when she began to cry. Guyan was very surprised to hear this and asked if it was really true. The girl was a little perturbed that her own husband didn't believe her. He, in turn, thought about it, and she still couldn't believe how handsome he was. And yet, the man pondered for a while, and then said that he would take April with him after all. The girl didn't object. When he held out his hands to take her to him, the moment Gloria started to hand her over, the rabbit nestled back against her body and wasn't about to go into anyone's arms. The guy was very surprised to see this, and didn't understand what was even going on. And most importantly, how could Princess April be with Gloria at all? The girl hugged that rabbit for a while longer, and after that, she looked at her indignant face and told everyone else that she would probably just take her with her. It would be easier that way. The governess, along with Guyan, were incredibly surprised. The governess, along with Guyan, were incredibly surprised. Then Gloria went to the banquet hall, where breakfast was already waiting for her. But as soon as the food was brought to her, she was very surprised. All because they brought carrots for April, but the rabbit started eating her roasted meaty steak, and there were only 2 raw carrots left for Gloria. The girl watched the whole situation for a while, and then she realized that it was just a rabbit of prey. But she didn't know that rabbits could eat meat at all, because she thought they were herbivores. April, for her part, didn't even glance at the carrots. Gloria began to eat the food she had left, and thought that probably meant that the beastmen ate what the humans ate. After breakfast, she decided to go with the rabbit to the lovely and warm bathroom. The girl took a towel and a huge brush to herself, and said it was time for them to wash and give her teeth a good scrubbing to make her smell like a fresh dandelion. And when April heard that, she looked at Gloria with horror. As she ate that beautiful meat steak, she was covered in grease and blood from it. For a while, Gloria just looked at her, and then, taking her in her arms, told her she needn't worry, for she would help her wash. She was silent for a while, and then she told April that she was her foster mom now, after all, and wondered if all good mothers shouldn't take care of their beautiful babies. The rabbit looked at her in surprise. She made eyes at Gloria for a moment, but then she just jumped away, pushing her hind paws away from her face. The girl hadn't expected such a blow to her cheek, and it hurt her incredibly badly, but she clenched her teeth and smiled back at her. April was a little surprised, because she had expected the girl to yell and curse at her. But Gloria, for her part, slowly began to walk toward her, and afterward ran after April, who began to run away just to avoid the bathroom. She was telling the girl to stop, for she needed to take a bath right away. April continued to run away on her little paws, and Gloria in turn also added to pray that she wouldn't catch her. And from that moment, a whole minute had passed. The girl was already very tired of running after her, because she was also wearing a dress in which it is very uncomfortable to run fast. She dropped to the floor and said she never thought she would have such poor stamina with this character. April, for her part, kept her distance and eyed her new mommy warily. Gloria leaned against the hot tub, sighing heavily, and said that they needed to clean her teeth thoroughly because there were no implants in this world. So they need to take good care of them. She definitely can't replace them. She pretended to be too upset, so she covered her face with her hands and started pretending to cry to make April feel better, and it really worked. The rabbit started to come up to her leg to comfort her, as she was even a little ashamed of her actions. But at the same moment, Gloria smiled wickedly and grabbed her little body and told her that she had caught her after all. Now she would give it a thorough scrubbing, and every tooth would be cleaned. The maids on the floor below from the bathroom were very surprised to hear all this, but realized it was best not to get in there. Mrs. Milton stood in the hall, where April's room was just being prepared, and looking out of the window, could understand nothing. She didn't recognize, and how the princess could have gone with that awful Gloria and not her, the man who had been looking after her all this time. Mrs. Milton screamed and said that this villainess was definitely up to something, and didn't understand how she even dared to wash the princess with her own hands. She turned to the maid and said that she had no more strength to bear it all, so she told them to run to watch her, and if they suspected anything, to go at once and report it. Several hours had passed since then, and Gloria had finally finished washing Princess April. They came into the room and the girl sat her down on the bed, then smiling apologized, asking if she was angry, but the rabbit was very unhappy. Then she wanted to pet her, saying that her teeth must be brushed, for otherwise they would be spoiled and she would no longer be able to eat her fine meat in peace. Gloria in turn hesitated, and then she asked how she felt about the other offer. She would brush her teeth, and Gloria would do as she wished. When April heard this, she was immediately interested in such an offer. She thought it would be quite profitable for her. The girl took her in her arms and put her back down, stroking her. Then she asked if she would like to have dinner with her, so that it would be more fun for the two of them. April just stared for a while, but then jumped into her arms. It was a sign of agreement. Gloria, smiling, began stroking her and kissing her on the top of her head, telling her that she was an incredible cutie after all, and also called her their bunny. April didn't like that very much, so she slapped the girl on the cheek with her paw. Gloria didn't immediately realize what it was for, but she apologized afterward for calling her that. The next day, Gloria had a strange dream. She was in a large space and didn't realize where she was at first. Looking around, the girl assumed she was probably asleep, and realized that this was definitely not the Huanzhong Road. Not far away from her, she saw some huge translucent tree that beckoned her with its greatest energy. The girl, looking around, also saw that it was not one, and that delighted her. She wanted to go up and look at each one separately, because these trees were incredibly large. But at that moment, butterflies began to fly past her. She noticed that they looked like porcelain or glass butterflies, very fragile in appearance. She reached her hand up so that the butterfly would land on her finger so she could get a good look at it, but the butterflies just flew around her, and one of them said they were very happy to welcome the girl. Gloria was very surprised to hear this. The butterfly flew even closer to her and said they were waiting for her. The girl was even wary after these words. She thought that she was probably dead, because talking butterflies don't exist. But at that moment, this flying creature said that after she disappeared, everything was going just horribly, and this time she should make a contract with them, because she was the only one who could do it. It made Gloria even a little creepy. Then she wondered what kind of contract they were talking about, and who they were. Butterfly said that if she made a contract with them, she could use all their power, and they also talked about how much they needed her. Gloria covered her face with her hands and then said she understood, but she wondered if they could hang back a little, because she was getting dizzy trying to keep track of their fluttering. And soon indeed all the butterflies stopped at the same place, and one of them said that she was the one they had chosen. Gloria was finally able to look at them normally, and wondered why they felt that way and who they even were. The creatures explained that they were butterflies that lived on the world tree, and the tree she had seen quite recently was just such a tree. It is the source of strength in this other world. Gloria was a little wary when she heard about the world tree, and when she said that, she wasn't quite sure if she could protect April. But the butterflies replied that of course she would be up to the task, because they would help her. She will be able to do anything she wants and protect anyone. She would be an incredibly important person to this world if she would only agree to make a contract with them. Gloria pondered for a while, but then said she would do it. These flying creatures were immediately happy and thanked her. They said that they loved her very much, but then the girl suddenly opened her eyes in horror. She looked around and saw that she was in the bedroom, and realized that it was just a very realistic dream. Gloria sat on the bed and didn't know if this was actually some kind of contract because everything seemed very realistic. She couldn't understand anything and didn't know what was going to happen next. But then suddenly she heard some strange sounds coming from the street. She pressed the bell to summon the maid. The maid came into her room quickly enough and inquired if her mistress had summoned her. Gloria sat down on the bed and said she was calling, and wondered what was going on and why it was so noisy outside in general. The maid hesitated for a while and then said it was because Miss April was missing. Everyone was looking for her now. Soon the girl also got dressed and went outside, where all the maids were calling for Princess April, trying to find her. The girl looked around and did not know how this could have happened. Then she saw Mrs. Milton, who was crying for the princess. When she saw Gloria not far from her, she looked at her angrily. The girl thought that it wasn't her fault, because she hadn't even seen the princess that day. The girl went to her maid and asked her if this was a common occurrence. She said that it happened when she was in a bad mood, or when she didn't want to study. Another maid said that this is quite common before also the birth mother's anniversary. Gloria, when she heard that, was overjoyed. She remembered that Chloe Morda was the woman who had been in prison, and it was she who had given April life. The girl had also heard that when the princess was very young, her mother had died right in front of the little girl, and it was incredibly traumatizing for the girl. She walked straight over to look for April after all, and realized that she was probably always a rabbit, and her moods were apparently as fickle as that animal's. Gloria felt insanely sorry for the little girl, and she realized that they needed to find her as soon as possible, because she must be having such a hard time. Then she walked to the side and saw the Grain Army. The girl assumed that he had probably gone in search of her as well. But the first thing the girl was going to do was check in the garden, for that would be the most obvious place for a rabbit to hide. She went straight there and then suddenly saw someone standing next to her. As soon as she turned her head to the side, she saw that it was her husband. She hadn't expected the Grain to go along with her, so she was scared even a little. The girl wanted to ask him something, but decided not to, thinking that it was too dangerous, because he was so handsome that just one look made her heart jump out of her chest, not to mention talking to him. She turned away from him and tried to come to her senses, telling him that she wasn't interested in any relationship at all. She wouldn't fall in love with him just because of his pretty face, because she wasn't Gloria. So, you have to have your own head on your shoulders. She stood back for a while longer, and then smiled as she realized that she had managed to find that indifference after all. So now she could definitely go looking for April without anything distracting her. The man remained silent for a while longer and just looked at her. But then the girl turned. When she heard his voice, she immediately trembled. However, she did not even turn around. Gloria decided to pretend she hadn't heard him, so she just walked forward. But the man wasn't going to back down and asked her to wait just a second longer. Then the girl had no choice but to back down, so she turned to him and smiled, asking if there was anything he wanted. The guy in his turn went over to her and took some kind of petal off her head and examined it for a while. Then he pointed his hand at him and said she had a petal in her hair. That's why he wanted to stop her. It made the girl very uncomfortable, because she had already thought that he wanted to talk to her about something. But it was just a matter of a petal stuck in her hair. Then Gloria fixed her hair and thanked him, and then suggested that he give it to her, for she would throw it away. He didn't suspect anything, just smiled and touching her palm, handed over that very petal. Gloria immediately looked away and thought about the fact that he might have actually given it normally, and it was completely unnecessary to open her palm to put the thing there. Then she started to walk away, saying that since that was the end of it, she should go. But the man stopped her and asked if she was looking for April too. The girl was a little angry that he had called her out again, but then replied that of course, she too had decided to help look for the girl. He in turn came closer to her. But Guyan stared at her in surprise for a while, and then asked why she was avoiding him in the first place. The girl was very frightened by such a question. She could not believe that it was really possible for a man who had held her hand all through the wedding night to speak like that, and then just left her alone in the morning. Guyan in turn said that he thought she was getting along quite well with April, and it turns out that the girl is completely different from what the rumors said about her. When the guy said those words, Gloria felt uneasy because he had a very beautiful voice, and she even started to think about things she didn't want to think about in this situation. She didn't say anything for a while, and then she said it was because April was very sweet, and her heart melted every time she saw her, and she didn't know how that was possible, because she'd never felt that way about anyone before. When she said all that, there was an awkward silence between them. The girl just stood there, staring at him, and thought about the fact that the guy seemed to be hovering, and it was really so. Her husband just stood there and smiled strangely, and the girl didn't understand what kind of expression he had on his face. It was impossible to read his emotions. Then she assumed that the man probably already regretted marrying her, but there was nothing she could unfortunately do about it. But then, suddenly some creature flew up to her and called her by name. The girl was very surprised and started looking around, not knowing what was going on. But when she saw the butterfly, it calmed her down, saying that it was them, and also added that they would help her now. As Gloria stared in horror at this swarm of insects, she asked if this really wasn't a dream, but reality. But the butterfly replied that of course it was a dream. After all, that was where they had met. The girl immediately remembered that they were, of course, the butterflies of the world tree. Gloria, frowning, said that if they were so eager to help her, they should have shown up a little earlier before she said various stupid things to her husband. But the creatures replied that they were actually a little surprised themselves, but it couldn't be helped, as it was. Gloria decided to change the subject and asked what powers they had. The butterfly replied that they could go anywhere, and she could find out what was there, by the way. But the butterfly also said that there was one important but. The distance between them must not be too great. Gloria immediately assumed that it was probably the same system as Bluetooth, because if she moved too far away from her phone with headphones, they simply disconnected. Then the butterflies said they could also make even the worst soil into incredibly fertile soil and revive dried-up rivers. The creatures wanted to talk more about their merits, but Gloria in turn wondered why such incredible butterflies as they were suddenly decided to contract with her, since she had such a reputation in this world. However, one of the butterflies said that it was all because she was Gloria, and everyone else was unreliable, but she was the one they could definitely trust. When the girl heard this, she was very surprised and asked if they really thought so. The butterflies answered that of course they did, because otherwise they would not have made any deals with her. Gloria was silent for a while and then asked if they could help her find April so it would be faster. The butterflies agreed, of course, and soon flew off into the distance to fulfill their task. The girl began to watch a huge cluster of shiny dots. They were butterflies, so they were displayed in the real world, and they led her straight to a huge tree. Gloria immediately realized that she was in that particular tree, and lifting her head higher, she saw that she was indeed. There, on the topmost branch, sat a little rabbit. The girl looked anxiously up there, and didn't understand how she could have even climbed to such a height, and assumed that most likely the girl couldn't get down, which was why she had disappeared for so long. When she turned to April in her direction, the rabbit's huge eyes immediately turned. Then she immediately began to repeat April's name and told the girl to jump, for she would catch her. But the rabbit, when he saw this great height, was of course very frightened. April got so angry that she even started growling at her. Then Gloria said that since she was not going to jump, she would go to the rescue and said that she would be back soon, and she must stay on the branch, for the girl would go up to save the poor thing. And at this point indeed, Gloria came over and started climbing the tree, saying that it was okay and she could definitely do it. Because climbing trees is her second hobby, she's an expert at it for sure. April, for her part, just sat there and watched. She was able to calm down a little now that she had found someone who could help her. Soon Gloria was upstairs. She hugged the bunny, telling her that it was okay, Mommy was here, so she didn't have to be afraid of anything else. April then jumped on her shoulder, and the girl told her to hold on as tightly as she could so she wouldn't fall. And at that moment, slowly, she began to climb down from the tree. Suddenly something went wrong, and she accidentally caught the bark with her big shoe heel and started flying straight down, screaming that she was in incredible pain because she had twisted her foot so badly. And just when she was about to land on solid ground and smash herself some more, the girl suddenly felt someone grab her. Gloria opened her eyes and saw that it was Grayan. The girl was surprised, for she hadn't expected him to be there at all, much less to save her life. Then she remembered the rabbit that was with her, and turning to April, she asked if she was all right. The rabbit clung to her case tighter and cried again. Then she said with a heavy sigh, the little girl cried again. She must have been really scared. But she hugged her tighter and told her it was okay, because they were both safe now and she shouldn't be afraid. Grayan in turn set the girl on the ground and she stepped away from him, for this awkward situation to resolve itself. Then the girl turned to April and told her to never climb that high again if she was sure she couldn't get down. But she stopped then to moralize to the rabbit, saying she was still glad she was okay and that she wasn't hurt. But then suddenly April didn't like something, so she hit the girl again on the cheek with her paw. Gloria didn't really understand why she was hit. However, she apologized anyway. It was easier than trying to find out something. Then she suggested that the little girl go to the manor house and take a hot bath to wash off all the dirt. And after that, a nice dinner. Grayan, for his part, was surprised, for the girl had just left him without even saying, "Thank you for saving him." He followed her to see if she was all right. Gloria, at that moment, and herself, remembered that he had saved her. She didn't even thank him, so she turned and told him, "Thank you for that." The man didn't expect such a harsh reaction. However, he said that it was nothing, you see. It was his duty after all. After that, they had an awkward silence for a while. Then the girl said that in that case she would be on her way and wished him a good day. She also said that he didn't have to worry about April, because she would take care of her. She turned and started to leave when she heard her husband's voice asking her to stop for a moment. Gloria immediately turned toward him, and he in turn, turning the other way and looking embarrassed, said he wouldn't even mind having dinner with them. The girl, when she heard this, was very surprised, and he in turn asked if she would mind if he kept them company. Gloria didn't understand why he was so shy when she asked him that. She thought also that it would be pretty honest to say that she would be a little uncomfortable, so she wished she could say no to him. April, however, in turn began spitting garbage out of her mouth and growling the whole time while doing so. The girl hugged her tighter and told her that apparently she only wanted to dine in her company, and suggested that the man get everyone together some other time. The man was a little upset, but then, smiling, said that of course, in that case, the three of us would all eat next time. After that, he turned around and left. Gloria also went in the direction of the manor. Several hours had passed since then, and when darkness fell, she finally arrived at the bedroom. The girl, having changed into her pajamas, lay down on the soft and large bed, sighing heavily, thinking about the fact that she was incredibly tired. As she had anticipated, caring for a child is incredibly difficult, as is being a maid to that child. She rolled over onto her other side and thought about the fact that the wolfman had just gotten married, but he was already disappearing at night. And she didn't understand how such behavior could be understood. No, surely it was for the best. After all, if he were in this place, it would only be even more of a headache. But he wasn't, and the girl was even angrier about it. Gloria lay on the bed and thought about how she was even a little lonely and sad that she would be sleeping all alone now, even after being married. But suddenly she saw some movement in the blanket not far from her. She didn't know what it was, and she assumed that perhaps someone was trying to assassinate her, for Gloria had done many bad things, so it was possible. Then the girl threw a blanket over her face so that she would not be immediately recognized, and she heard cute little footsteps nearby. She crawled up higher and suddenly saw April, who jumped onto her bed and hid her face in her paws. She thought about how incredibly cute the creature was. If she were a little closer, she wondered if April would let her see her human form. She lay down beside her and, closing her eyes, said goodnight to April. She, for her part, was already really trying to sleep. At this very time, his assistant came to Guyen, who was at his training room, and said that the maids were talking about April going to her mistress's room again. The man, who had just interrupted several of his opponents, looked at him in surprise and asked, "Is she really going there again right now?" But the assistant replied that she was already there and apparently they were going to bed already. The guy replied that he understood everything and asked him to leave everything as it was and stay out of the situation. After that, he wondered about Gloria. It was all very strange to him because she wasn't at all what the rumors said she was. After all, he had heard of many people saying that she loved to bully even fish before. However, the girl he met now was completely different. She was even kind. The man thought to himself that she must be a good person. Yes, and he likes this girl, and animals are always drawn to kind and good people. He smiled, wondering if he should continue exploring, since she seemed to be avoiding him, and he even wondered how much longer all this would even go on. When morning came, Gloria woke up contentedly early, the sun already shining on her face, and she stretched and yawned. The girl thought about how incredibly wonderful it was, since she had slept like a baby all night and hadn't even woken up once. But when she looked at the empty seat beside her, she was very surprised, for she didn't know where April had gone in the first place. And then she assumed that the girl probably liked to get up early. After that, Gloria decided that they had managed to get a little closer during all this time. But she also felt that she should have wished the little girl a good morning and told her how good she looked on this beautiful sunny day. And she had left so early, it even made Gloria feel kind of sad. Soon the girl rose already finally awake, did her morning chores, and after changing her clothes, accompanied by the maids, went to the dining room. She wondered if she had eaten breakfast at all, if she had eaten only meat again. Gloria thought it was important for a growing body like hers to get enough vitamins from vegetables, so she really wanted April to eat more than just grilled steaks, and the girl was also very worried that she might disappear again. But she hadn't heard any screams since this morning, so the likelihood was pretty slim. And soon the girl suddenly stopped, because not far from her she saw a little girl standing near the window and humming some song. Gloria was very surprised. She looked at the incredibly blonde hair, red eyes, and her beautiful sweet face. Her mouth even opened wide in surprise, for April was standing before her in human form. She thought it was incredibly sweet for her weak heart, so she immediately turned away, trying to calm herself down, in order to keep her heart from just exploding. And after a while, when she'd gotten her breathing back to normal, then Gloria turned to April and asked if it was true that she was. The girl tried to act calm, telling herself that she should set a good example. April herself looked away, embarrassed, but still waved her head in agreement. Gloria was a little surprised that she was answering her, and then wondered if she had had breakfast at all. And when the girl said the word yes, she just couldn't believe how beautiful and perfect her voice was. April in turn didn't even look at the girl and said that she had a request. She wanted to go somewhere. She was afraid it would be hard to get there alone. Gloria in turn patted her on the shoulder and said okay. She had promised that she would honor her every wish, so they could go wherever she wanted to go. When April heard this, she was very surprised. Her cheeks turned even more pink, and she looked at her new mother with hope in her eyes and asked if she would really go with her. To Gloria, it was an incredible stroke of grace and simply adorable. So she took the girl's hand and said that of course they could visit all the places the little girl wanted, just as long as she was happy and brushed her teeth. Soon they were already in town and had arrived just where April wanted them to be. The girls were standing in front of some huge arena with only men everywhere. Gloria was a little surprised at this choice of location, and then turning to April, asked if she was sure that was where she wanted to go. The girl happily said that of course she wanted to be here. Then Gloria turned around and noticed that this was some kind of arena for swordsmen, and apparently their rabbit was quite unusual. Then the girl also wondered if she even liked shopping and any good food at all. Gloria also thought about the fact that it was entirely possible, since their rabbit was a carnivore after all and could eat anything it wanted. But at that moment, April stepped aside and looked with great gusto at a small shop that stood nearby. When the girl noticed this, she immediately realized that she must have come for the waffles. So she turned to the little girl and asked if she wanted some waffles to eat. April, when she heard this, looked at her mother in surprise and asked if it could be done. Gloria immediately pulled out her wallet and said of course, so she offered to go and buy some. And just as they were about to approach this shop, a man suddenly came up to the girl, and he apologized to the Duchess and wanted to say something. Gloria immediately looked at him, and he in turn added that Mrs. April was forbidden to eat street food, for Miss Milton had forbidden her to do so. When the girl heard this, she was immediately upset, because she realized that she would probably be banned now, and she would never be able to taste these beautiful waffles. However, Gloria, when she heard about Miss Milton's prohibition, she immediately got excited and went that way, and said that since that was the case, they should definitely eat at that place. When they approached this shop, the girl immediately asked April what she wanted. The girl said she wanted apple jam and cream on top. The guard tried to stop them, but it was useless. And soon she and Gloria were sitting in the bleachers eating these beautiful waffles that had just been made. Before long, many men had already begun to appear in the arena. Some had weapons in their hands, others were just talking among themselves. Gloria thought about how this was probably some sort of survival duel, with 10 finalists riding the board. But she leaned back against the back of her seat and thought it was just a cliché. They sat there for a while, and the girl noticed that she liked it, because it was interesting enough, even though she didn't like violence the most. But at that moment, when she looked at April, she saw that the girl had turned back into a rabbit, and was very angry. Gloria immediately wanted to go to her, but realized it was better not to bother the girl right now. She didn't understand why the girl had suddenly turned back into a rabbit. April in turn started making some hand motions as if she was punching, and the girl didn't realize what kind of battle mode she had activated. Gloria's brain exploded at the mere realization that it was a fighting rabbit. Gloria's mind was exploding at the mere realization that it was a fighting rabbit. Suddenly, a man came onto the battlefield. He was the announcer and said that they were asking the semi-finalists to come to the arena because it was their turn, and a man named Dominic made it to the semi-finals, and his opponent was Jade. The announcer said that they had been waiting for him for so long, and that was indeed true. The tribunes immediately began to shout loudly, applauding this little boy. Gloria was very surprised when she saw Jade. Then she heard all the screams of the little girls sitting around and shouting his name excitedly. Taking a closer look at this boy, Gloria just couldn't believe it was Jade Kevin. He had silver hair with turquoise strands and golden eyes. Even though he was still very small and short, his sword skills were incredible. He is the first on the list of candidates April could fall in love with in the future. At this time, Guyan came to his aid, and seeing that there was no one near him, inquired where they had gone in the first place. The aide replied that they had gone to the swordsman arena. In fact, he himself was beginning to get very worried. All this because the Ainston family had sent out the mercenaries again, and he had heard that there were about 42 of them, and their leader had put them down without any difficulty. He thought about how incredible this guy was. The man in turn held his sword behind his back and said that the girl must have wanted to go with Boyani and Mana. He smiled and said that she wasn't quite small yet, but she still wanted to become even stronger. The aide, when he heard that, immediately realized that he must be referring to the princess. Guyan, for his part, said that there was nothing he could do, but he just wanted her to grow up safely, so he had to make some sacrifices to do so. The aide followed his master and asked if he wasn't angry because the mistress had taken April without his permission. The man in turn hid the sword to his sheath and wondered why he should suddenly be angry with her. Guyan turned around and started walking, saying that there was absolutely no need for her to ask his permission. When Guyan heard that, he was very surprised and asked if she wasn't from the Ainston family. The guy sighed heavily, saying that just because she's from there, it absolutely doesn't mean she's a villain either. Therefore, such prejudices are not justified. The aide looked warily at the gentleman, and then wondered if he was sure they were even talking about Gloria. Guyan replied, "Absolutely. She might not have a very good reputation. However, rumors could indeed be drastically different from reality. And he absolutely believes that people can change, and this girl could be an example of that. The man went on his way. Then the assistant ran after him and said that he wasn't really sure about it as much as the master and was very worried. And he wondered what would happen if she somehow used the princess to harm him. After all, the most important reason the Ainston family had sent her was surely for surveillance and manipulation. But Guyan interrupted him and asked him to stop talking. The man bowed at once and apologized to him for allowing himself to talk so much. Then he told Sir Kane to hurry back to the knighthood, for he thought he would be a little late. The man asked in surprise if he was going to go to the swordsman's arena. The man in turn said that his wife and daughter were having fun somewhere, so he couldn't just not join them and go about his business. At this time in the arena, a fight was just about to begin. The little boy managed to dodge a punch and land his own in a very professional manner. Gloria, watching what was happening, realized that she could not say that he was a brilliant swordsman. His skills were certainly good, but he was not perfect. Then the girl turned to the side, and when she saw the look on April's face, she was very surprised. She didn't understand what was going on with the girl. After all, she looks pretty cute. And then a second later, she's incredibly angry and ready to kill someone. That's when she figured it out and took a hold of herself and told her that Mommy was totally against it. April started to get a little uncomfortable, so she immediately slapped her in the face to get loose. Gloria, in turn, realized the mistake and apologized to the girl, saying that she was just scared that a beautiful bunny like her could fall in love with this mousy guy she didn't even know personally. The girl also said that she must have been surprised from this herself, so she really apologizes for such uncomfortable situations. April pondered what to do for a while, but then she hugged her mother. It was a sign of forgiveness. Gloria immediately thanked her and was ready to cry, but at that moment their conversation was interrupted by the commentator. He said that they had all been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now the long-awaited finale was coming. He asked, without addressing anyone in particular, who would be the winner of the season after all. The girl, in turn, was very surprised and asked if it was all too fast, and also wondered what they were doing. They had all gathered together, and she was surprised that they had done it just to catch one child. She thought it was pretty low and mean of them to do that. April, in turn, was ready to burst out of her seat and run into the arena to show these idiots the right way to act. But Gloria calmed her down, telling her that she herself was surprised at how unfair it was. In turn, one of the fighters turned to the guy, saying that he had better refrain from all these speeches, because he is giving him one very important advice, because worry really about his health. He said in a completely confident voice that a kid like him wouldn't be able to resist his sword, so he'd better not try and give up right now, so as not to get crippled. But the fellow, when he heard this, only smiled and said that in that case he would like to see the man teach him a lesson, and called him an old man. Gloria, when she heard this, was very surprised. She realized that even at the very end, he had just stomped them all into the ground, and yet the guy was pretty intimidating despite his age and height. April, in turn, began to look at him again with a loving gaze. The girl thought about the fact that her eyes were, of course, very beautiful, but she would never accept him anyway, so she'd better not even try. She offered the little girl a little snack, for this action had been going on for quite some time, and they were given a short break. Charles, who was their bodyguard, said that the Duke would be very angry if he knew they had done that. But Gloria, smiling, told him not to be so correct. The boy in turn became indignant and said that his name was actually Bill, and the other Richard. Soon they came to a small restaurant, and the girl was glad to see it. She hadn't even hoped for a full meal, thinking that they would have to eat snacks from the stalls. Gloria thought about the fact that since they had come to the restaurant, she would like to eat more. One of the guys, whose name was Richard, said there were no rooms left at the place, so he suggested they go back to the arena so as not to piss off the Duke. But the girl told him to just wait for a while. At that moment, a waitress came up to them and apologized, saying that if they didn't mind, another guest would like to join them. Gloria immediately wondered if they would be sitting together, and also asked who it would even be. As soon as she turned her head to the side, she saw Jade sitting at a vacant table and raising his glass in greeting to them. Of course, she wasn't very happy about it, but she wanted a snack, so she walked over to his table with her guards. Gloria thought about the fact that they had met Jade again. He in turn took April in his arms and told her that she had a really cool name, and she in turn complimented him, and he thanked her for it. Then the girl turned to Charles, who was standing nearby, and asked if he understood what April was saying at all. The man was a little surprised, but replied that he didn't. He had never understood her like that. Gloria was starting to get worried at this point. Even though she didn't understand what April was saying, she still couldn't forgive her for it. Soon the waitress brought their food to them. Jade turned to April, who was sitting on their table, and said she could start on the legs first. Gloria, hearing this, got even more angry. It pissed her off that he did what she wanted him to do, so she took the chicken legs and started feeding them to the guards. But then suddenly, she heard someone's voice. It belonged to April, and the girl was very surprised. She had never heard her in a rabbit's body before. Gloria was immediately overjoyed and thought of it as some sort of motherly blessing, but as soon as she turned her head, she immediately realized it wasn't like that. She realized April because the girl had turned back into a human. Jade, who was still amazed at what he had seen, said that he would have loved to eat, but before he even realized it, he had fallen under April's spell. The girl, in turn, took a chicken leg and was about to take a bite. Then, turning aside, she asked him if he wanted to take this piece of meat. Gloria, when she heard that, she immediately started to feel proud of April. After all, she wasn't even willing to sacrifice the guy she liked for food. Soon they all finished lunch and went outside. She took April's hand, but she could feel Jude's gaze behind her. And it was true. The guy was walking and didn't take his eyes off Gloria for some reason. The girl was very annoyed by this. She couldn't understand why he was doing it, and assumed that maybe he was some kind of enemy of his parents. But she was sure that there had never been any problems between them. But maybe this guy has just heard about what her reputation is, so that's why he treats her that way. She knew that under no circumstances should she let down her defenses, and she absolutely had to be careful. At that moment, April turned to her and said she wanted to look at a store. Gloria said that of course they would go to the store she wanted, and also offered to buy some candy on the way, because she thought it should be fun. April, when she heard this, was immediately excited. After all, she had never been allowed to do that before. Then she looked angrily at Jude, who was walking behind her, and thought about the fact that no matter how hard he tried, her mom would still be the best thing for her. So he would always be the loser. But at that moment, April suddenly let go of her hand and, addressing the girl as a duchess, suggested that she go that way. Gloria, of course, did not pretend to be offended at being called duchess. But in fact, it was just awful, because she had asked the girl to call her mommy. But at that moment, Jude stepped forward and, turning to the girl, asked her how she felt about going to see the fireworks at all. April, when she heard this, was very surprised, and he in turn said that she would definitely not regret it if she agreed, because nearby there is just a beautiful place from where they will be seen. April didn't deny him, so they headed straight out. Gloria thought at that moment that fireworks should have been with her, not this guy who is trying to make you the best in April's eyes. She even stopped for a while because of her anger. But at that moment the girl heard something strange behind her, so she turned around to see what was going on. But then everything happened so fast that Gloria didn't even realize how it could have happened. Jude ran up and threw her aside, because a man had come up behind her and was swinging at her. When the enemy was at a sufficient distance, the guy looked up and saw that it was the elderly man he had fought on the battlefield. Jude came closer to him and said that he knew perfectly well that he didn't like him, but that he didn't need to take his anger out on the people around him. Gloria, in turn, immediately approached April and hugged her, so that the girl was safe and not afraid. The boy, in turn, asked why he decided to interfere with someone he didn't even know personally. Then the man started shouting loudly, and said that he had nothing to do with it, because he had to deal with this woman. The man was incredibly angry with her, and was already ready to run to attack again. The girl in turn thought about how much Gloria had done, and they were not good things. And this stranger clearly did not want to thank her for anything. But just in time, Gayan emerged from the crowd. He turned to the girl and told her that he had finally found her. Gloria was so surprised when she saw him that she couldn't even say a word. She didn't understand how he'd even known they were here, and assumed he'd probably been following her somehow. When she suggested that it was more likely that this snooping might have something to do with the fact that he suspected her. But she's not the same person she used to be, and she wouldn't hurt anyone. No doubt she's guilty of it too, but after all, she's a completely different person now, and it would just be unfair to be judged by actions she never did. At that moment, the man looked at the girl who was standing next to Gloria, and turning to April, said that he hadn't seen her in this guise in a long time. He sighed heavily, and said that apparently he and the lady were having a pretty good time. He was really sad because they hadn't invited him to all this fun. Gloria, when she noticed this, was very surprised. She couldn't believe that the Duke could be jealous of it at all. Then Guyen looked at the man who was standing next to him. He turned to the Duke, frightened, and said that he had misunderstood him, for he would never have had any relations with that woman. It was all a simple misunderstanding. The girl at this point thought about the fact that she was actually the one who was supposed to speak, but it was too late. Then the man turned to the guy and asked him to have some respect, because she was actually his Duchess of Salisbury. And when the guy heard this, he was very surprised and said that it just didn't make any sense, and asked if he was really saying that he had married this villain after all, and if that was the case, it would just be the end of their world in that case. The Duke, hearing this, was beginning to get angry, and told the old man that he had warned him after all. However, he did not obey, and even after his warning continued to insult his wife. He deserved to be punished for such behavior, so he turned to the guards and told them to take him away. The men were a little surprised at the Duke's strictness. However, they immediately grabbed this guy, otherwise there was no way to please. The stranger in turn turned to Gloria and said that he would never forgive her, for she had caused the people of his village to starve to death. When the girl heard this, she was very surprised. She didn't understand what he meant or why the villagers should starve to death at all. Duke was about to go after him to punish him for those horrible words, but she immediately ran up and stopped him, telling him to stop for just a second. Guyan looked at her in surprise and asked why she was stopping him all of a sudden. Gloria said she thought they should listen to what the old man was trying to say, but she also asked that they not do it in full view of everyone, and suggested they go somewhere else where there would be as few spectators as possible. Guyan looked at her in surprise, and Gloria in turn said that he didn't deserve punishment at all, for they were just words. She stood there smiling, but she was getting worried, because she couldn't understand why he was looking at her so surprised. But then suddenly the man smiled and said he understood. In that case, they would do as his wife wished. Gloria, hearing this, immediately smiled and thanked him for it. Gloria realized that she was being silly and turned away, thinking that there was nothing she could do. She was too caught up in him. If he kept looking at her like that, her heart wouldn't be able to take the strain. It's already beating too hard. Soon they walked a little farther, and April suddenly clung to her mistress, unwilling to let her go. Gloria, of course, was very pleased by this, but right now she had a little more important things to do. So she turned to April and asked if she could wait for them on the second floor with Jate. After all, this was the bar of the place, which was not at all suitable for children their age. But the girl refused to go anywhere. Then the woman explained that she needed to question the guy. However, with children, the atmosphere would be completely different. April continued to hug Gloria's legs. Then she looked at her husband, hoping that he could at least influence her daughter. Guyan turned to her and asked her to stir about her foster mom and better go to her daddy. But the girl at this point began to squeeze the girl's body even harder. The man was very offended that his words had been ignored, and he decided to use his fatherly authority. So he raised his voice a few tones and turned to April. The girl was so much upset and scared that even turned into a rabbit. Gloria immediately began to hug her and comfort her, saying that there is nothing wrong with it, because her father is not angry with her. He just wants her to obey. That's all. Jade, in turn, who was standing nearby, smiled and said that apparently April was madly attracted to Gloria. Then he turned to the girl and the man and asked if it would be okay if they just sat down at another table. And he thinks that it is not necessary to drink alcohol immediately if you are in a bar. They sell other more childish drinks. He continued to smile and said that in their time with child abductors on the loose, it seems safer to stay on the first floor together apparently. and doesn't even want to part with Lady Gloria, and to him wonders why that is. They pondered what the guy said for a while, and then they had to agree to it as soon as they got into the bar. They all sat down at one big table. Gloria pulled out some celery and offered it to April, asking if she wanted a little snack. The girl, as soon as she sniffed it and smelled its disgusting pungent odor, immediately threw it straight at Jude, who was sitting nearby.